generations of the viewer or the person watching. It could be all the way back from MTV, those days, to Last Comic Standing, which never was as good, never was as highly rated with anybody else but you on it. And it wasn't because Bill Bellamy or whoever it was, or Craig Robinson, weren't good hosts. It was because you always added this thing, this extra intangible that the audience understood and knew, and you weren't just a host.
That audience knew when I was up there doing stand-up that I owned a part of that show.
Well, they could have.
And I wasn't going to let that fucking ship take on water.
They could have. But also Gary Unmarried. Like, I look at Gary Unmarried, and I'm going to go on a limb here.
It should still be on the air.
I'm gonna say something about Gary Unmarried, which you're not going to like. A very soft, non-edgy
correct
CBS sitcom.
No, I mean, it is what it was. It was a family sitcom.
A family sitcom. One of the least respected kind of sitcoms out there by comedians.
Touching the machine.
Sorry. By comedians, because comedians don't get respect.
Do you think I give a fuck?
I know you don't.
Gaffigan's at a diner going, I don't like the Gary Unmarried.
I know you don't give a fuck, but deep down, every comic, 1%, wants to be loved. But the point is, that show was on for 2 years. With anybody else, that show would have been on for 6 episodes.
You think so?
But it was on for 2 years because you like carried the show. You're like I say this to anybody that'll listen as a comic, and a writer or a creator or a showrunner. If you're going to make it, you have to be a leader of men. You have to go into a place, and even if you're not, you have to go in and you are the fucking guy. There's a new sheriff in town. Sort of like Gil Younger came into Action when he directed Action that time. And it was this thing where it was like, holy shit, who is this guy? And he's taken over, and this is a whole different kind of thing. And when you went into Gary Unmarried, even when your first table read for Action, you went in, nobody's expecting anything. Gary Unmarried, we're negotiating the contract. People are waiting in the room to do the table read for 45 minutes until we negotiate the last point of that. You go in, people are waiting, they're pissed off, whatever, and you went in and you just were a leader. And that's what people saw in you, and the network, when they see that in somebody, they realize that, hey, if we're going to be betting $1 million, $2 million a show on somebody, we're going to be betting on a guy who's a leader, who's a guy who's going to take us to the promised land, and a guy who's going to be able to promote the show and really kick ass. And so that's what I feel it was for you. But you've never been the traditional kind of person ever, and doing that. And if a comic said to me, why don't I just do it like Jay Mohr, I'd say, you're in deep shit if you do it like Jay Mohr. And the reason being, and I'm not going to let you talk here, the reason that is because you've done it as a guy who goes in, and you're the only guy in history, white guy in history, that's hosted a game show, a reality show, and after that is able to book significant acting jobs. No one else has been able to do it. Because your acting skills and your Kreskin-like ability to walk in a room with a casting director or even when Clint Eastwood isn't in the room and he has to watch 150, 200 tapes, for people who would pay $100,000 to do the Clint Eastwood movie, you go in and you figure out a way to blow people away. And that's a hard thing to do as a comedian, to be able to act like that and know the instincts. As you know, in terms of comedy and acting, it's like a world-class swimmer trying to run a quarter mile and a world-class quarter mile trying to swim a 100-yard dash. It just doesn't mix, but you're the kind of guy...
Is there a quarter-mile race that I don't know about? That's a pretty quick
4:40, I'm sorry, whatever it's called.
I don't even know. You might have been right. It just seemed very short.
But the bottom line is that, so you're a guy... Stop touching the machine. Anyway.
Bartholomew Katz.
But you're the kind of guy who is able to book significant acting jobs. And as a comedian, if you intend to make it, besides the writing and creating, if you can't go in the room and book significant acting jobs, you're never going to get to the level you're going to get to. There's, and you're in the situation like, Bill Hicks, and that's a different world. Yes, he was a guy who didn't book significant acting jobs. Carlin didn't book them until later. But that's a different world. In today's world, I remember when Charlie Barnett came into my office, the greatest street performer of all time, who has since passed away. And he used to do 4-hour shows in the park, in Washington Square Park. And he came into my office one day in an afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon. He said, Barry, I just came back from the theater. I went to see New Jack City. I said, oh, how was it? He said, Barry, Chris Rock played a better crack addict than I'm a crack addict, and I am a motherfucking crack addict. And Chris Rock at the time was a little skinny, 90, 100-pound guy who just stood there with the mic in his hand, reading off a notepad on the stool.
Right.
And for some reason, he went onto that set, and he brought everything inside him that he had, and he put a performance together that was extraordinary. And that got him noticed as an actor and was able to get him to the next level in terms of that thing. And that's what you've been able to do. But that's a rarity these days. So as a comic, you got to figure out a different way to be able to do everything.
Is this also a roundabout way of you telling me to get off my ass and write my own show?
Maybe.
Seriously.
Roundabout? No, actually it wasn't premeditated.
But I mean, I really think I could sit, like Nick and I have sat and we've talked scripts through almost in their entirety. You know, Recruiter, House on Fire, you know, a feature film and a show. And we always have funny show ideas. But it's not like SNL where you say, like when Johnny DiMaggio, and I was complaining, I don't know how to write a sketch, and he grabbed me and said, smoke a joint, go home, and make believe you're a fucking sketch writer. And I just did it. With a script, like when I read other people's scripts, it's like they describe the trees, the way the wind's blowing, and the cars, and I don't know why you explain what someone's wearing when they come into the kitchen, but you don't explain what they're wearing when they show up at the PTA meeting. What kind of car, like weird shit, like how the seatbelt's twisted. Like it entails, to me, so much minutia that I'm a fucking body and head puncher. I'm going for the KO. So a show like Recruiter, which is already registered, so don't steal it, a-holes. I know what I want him to be, and I know how I want him to behave. I've written out the recruiting pitches and stuff like that. But I think, in my mind, I believe that I need a guy or girl to come in that knows that stuff, that bizarre scale. It's almost like the ribs, bones, and scales, and I just fucking put the guts in it.
But then you can find somebody, and you mentioned, and I want to say something that's also a sensitive issue, because your wife is unbelievably talented in so many ways as a writer and creator, and then I always say this, the openings to the show Nikki were one of the most unique and original things that
they were dancing
that I've ever seen on television. And she worked with one of the greatest showrunners, Bruce Helford, and magnificent. But the thing is, what's hard for you as a person who is in a relationship with somebody that talented, you don't, as a comedian, you don't get the respect that you deserve when you write with somebody else. You don't see Louis C.K. writing a show with somebody else. Right. You don't see, I could name Whitney Cummings writing the show with somebody else. She creates the show on her own, and then she brings a staff in.
Is that how that went? I just figured they built the show around her.
No, she wrote the script.
And by the way, everybody listening, lay off. She's one of the funnier people you could ever spend time with.
She's one of the hardest.
She's like a guy.
She's one of the hardest working people when she started.
And she can take a punch.
She can take a punch when it comes to stand-up. Because what happened when you start off as a woman doing stand-up, and maybe I'm saying something that's going to get me in trouble, but
here I go again, man.
It's so much harder than a guy. It's 10 times harder than a guy, because what happens is the girls don't want to laugh at you because they don't want their date to look at you a certain way. And let's face it, on the other side, they don't want to laugh at you either. And so you got to go on and you got to be a certain way and make your material work.
I disagree.
Okay.
And I'm interrupting on purpose. If you're funny, no one has any choice whether or not they laugh at you. When I walk out, the goofy white guy at 22 years old from MTV's Lip Service or whatever, 20 years old, and I go out on stage to SUNY Farmingdale, an all-black 2-year school, where they go to the comedy show for the or SUNY Delhi, where they go to the comedy show like because we're going to ruin another guy.
I remember I booked Daryl Hammond after you to do that gig.
At Delhi or Farmingdale?
At Farmingdale. And he went on stage, and he gutted it out and finished the set, and he threw up after the show. And he called me up. He said, Barry, don't ever book me in a place like that again. I don't know
SUNY Farmingdale is a place where you walk out on stage. It's a predominantly black school, and they go to the comedy.
I don't know if it's that way now, but I mean, it was
Well,
then.
it was 15, 20 years ago. God, we've been doing this a long time. And you would walk out on stage, and they go, motherfucker, you suck. Like, as you walk to the mic.
Yeah.
Like, you're already just, whoa. And that's why they went to the show. SUNY Delhi.
You used to open with a rapping cow.
I did. I used to do a rapping cow in my act. My name is Bessie. You look at the menu. I'm proud of it. I was a child. I was 16 years old.
Then why did you do it last week?
Well, because I was bombing. You look on the menu and it says beef medallions. Is that really something happening out there? Has anybody seen a cow wearing a big Mercedes medallion around its neck? LL Cool Cow out there walking around. My name is Bessie. I'm white with black spots. I sleep standing up, not in a cot. I wear a bell. You can all go to hell. Surrounded by manure, so of course I smell G. Some people think of cows. Mine is in the gutter, so all you humans can suck my udders. That bit killed harder than walking has ever killed. People lost their minds like Arsenio was waving his fist.
Used to do an Arsenio impression, too.
That was my first holy shit moment on stage when I realized I could act on stage. Anyway, we'll get to that if you want. But SUNY Farmingdale, you walk out and they're like, you suck, motherfucker. This motherfucker's corny. And then they would heckle each other during your show. Like it was like being at medieval times. And you were the green section in its entirety.
Yeah.
And I went out at SUNY Farmingdale, and I had taken a train out there. I was tired, and I said, well, I can't do my stupid bits. So I think, like, Rich Voss is another guy. Like, there's very few white comics that will tell straight up black, you're so black, mama joke. Like,
yeah.
And I remember going, wow, it's nice to see him moving his lips when he's not trying to read. I said to a guy, and they were like, oh shit, like what the fuck was that? And then another guy said, man, you're so white. And I go, well, let me interrupt you. And I said, I'll never forget this. I said, you're so black. I've been on stage. I just got to the mic. Okay? Not 30 seconds. If you took your pulse to see what your pulse was, this has all happened before you hit 30. And I said, whoa. You're so black, and I leaned down like I was talking to a child. If I poured water on your head, coffee would come out your mouth. And I was in. And that was it. I never went back. Because those are I only knew like 5 you're so black jokes.
Oh, Jesus.
So how do we even get
We were
on
talking
that?
about women in comedy and how...
So my point being, they went there to bury me. To praise Caesar, not to bury him. They went out there to kill me. And when Lisa Lampanelli goes on in those roasts, no one goes, wait a minute, she's a woman, I'm not so sure. Or
I'll tell you why they...
Hold on. Well, I know what you're going to say why, but that's why I'm going to use a different example. Who's the gal that just did the Charlie Sheen roast? Blonde girl used to dance.
Amy Schumer.
Amy Schumer went up and killed. No one gave a shit if she had a vagina, tits, if she could give head, if she puts out, is she gay? Does she smoke grass? Does she just want to hang out? All they knew was there was a visceral reaction from what came out of her mouth and what came out of my body when she spoke. So I do agree with you that women have to work a little harder, but I also think they've dug themselves a hole from being bad.
Well, it could be. I mean, it could be. There's a lot of... When I had this conversation...
That's why I wanted... I'm sorry. That's why I wanted to say nice things about Whitney, because she's fucking funny. If you're hanging out with her, she's She's great.
Always funny, great with people, and an incredibly hard worker, and is fiercely loyal to giving people opportunities and fighting for people. Chris D'Elia is on the show. She wrote the show for Chris. And that's another thing. If you're somebody who's a comedian who gets your own show, you have to fight for what you believe in. And if you